why the South is so panic-stricken, and essentially the country is so panic-stricken about it. It means this. The generation of boys and girls who are sitting down at those lunch counters are the first generation of Negroes in the entire history of America who were not controlled by the Americans' image of them. This is why Montgomery is so demoralized. Little Rock is so paralyzed. New Orleans, people are going mad. If you can find anywhere in the Deep South Negroes, the South has been saying for generations, they know. They know the Negro. You would find them in that town. There was not a Negro in that town, really, essentially, who was not working with some white man. There was really no middle class. There were no outside agitators. These people walked. These people terrified. The town is still terrified because they don't, not even on the obvious level about violence. But if they're not who I thought they were, who are they?
What is this image that you were talking
This is precisely
about?
what is so difficult to get down to. But let me try to put it this way. What do you see? I don't know what white people see, when they look at a Negro anymore. But I do know very well that I realized when I was very young that whatever he was looking at, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was something he was afraid of. It was something to which he was attracted or which he found repulsive, but it wasn't me. I was not a man. Now, this image, I don't know what this image is, but it has something to do. It has something to do, I'm convinced of this, with the Puritan God. It has something to do with a peculiar and, I believe, absolutely bankrupt morality under which we all are suffering. The one person who was outside this constriction in fact and historically and in life was this pagan, this black pagan.
Who was brought over
Who was brought over,
chattel.
that's right, was brought over as a chattel to God's country. It seems to me that it's a reflection, a direct reflection of the effort made by the white American to keep away, to not be threatened by black people. In some way, the American vision of the world is all wrapped up with their vision of black men, which has to do with their vision of themselves. Black is evil. The saved are white. Now, there's certainly a thread which connects this reality to, which makes it possible for the Secretary of State to say, we will not do business with the devil. It is not a Southern problem. It's a national problem. What is happening in New Orleans today began to happen over 100 years ago when, in effect, the North, which was the government, having freed tens of thousands of illiterate black men, then made no provision for them. None whatever. None whatever. They were dumped on the body politic, and no one was responsible for them. And they were, of course, immediately political and industrial footballs for everybody. They were everybody's target. But in a way, black men were very useful to the American because in a country so absolutely undefined, so amorphous, where there were no limits, no height really, and no depth, there was one thing of which one could be certain. One knew where one was by knowing where the Negro was. You knew that you were not on the bottom because the Negro was there. You knew, one knows what sin is in the same way. One knows what danger is in the same way. Now, this implies a vision of oneself, it seems to me, and a vision of the world which doesn't stop at the American borders. It is also the way America deals with the world. It must, cannot possibly avoid moving directly into the heart of the people who make up America. I mean that the problem will never be resolved until everybody in the country, in some way, I know how impossible this sounds, however, this is what has to happen, is somehow enabled to do without this crutch. If I were going to describe, I can't name names, so a hypothetical white liberal. Well, I know what he thinks he's doing. But what he's mainly doing is something which demands my tacit cooperation. I have to agree that I am what he says I am in order for us to have any dialogue at all. Now, if I don't agree that he is what he I am what he thinks I am, then inevitably, one sees this at once in the faces of the people you're dealing with. It means that if I'm not what he takes me to be, that means I have a standard of judgment which is not his, which I may then be using to judge him.
And which may cut the ground from under all the standards.
All the other, yeah, exactly.
Do you regard this as a distinct threat to the, what shall I call it, the sense of spiritual security, American?
I think the Americans essentially, I don't think this, I know this. Yes, this is a threat to the American personality as it has so far been constituted. It's a threat to it is a threat to their definition of the world. It is a threat to the way what they think reality is. And I also mean to imply something else. Let me put it personally. It's the safest way to put it. There is something in me, for example, sometimes, and certainly when I was much younger, which resented the assumption on which all these things are based. It assumes that you have something I want, that there really isn't on the basis of it. Just looking at the evidence. Any reason for white people to assume the Negroes want to be like them? It's very difficult. I have said in effect that white men must give up what is in effect a crutch. That's right. So must I. This is entirely true. There is something very safe about being a Negro in a way because you can blame anything that happens to you on it. And this is the worst thing about being a Negro, quite apart now from New Orleans, race riots, lynchings, etc., etc. The worst thing about it is at one point somewhere in yourself, you have to realize that, all right, you are a Negro and this is all true, but before that you are a man and your life is in your hands. You are responsible for what happens to you. You cannot blame anybody for it. There is no point. There is no one to blame.